And good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101, the sound of the steel band taking us into today's program. Tonight, we'll have as our special guest, Vincent Alexander, who is an opposition appointed commissioner at GECOM, among other things. And Vincent is going to be here to talk about what's happening at GECOM. As you know, the opposition some days ago moved to the court challenging the authority of the Minister of Local Government to um, fiddle fiddle with the districts for the local government election. And they argued that the minister did not have any constitutional authority to fiddle with the boundaries for the local government election. And they further argued that the arrangements for the general election could not be used for the local government election. And this then triggered an action by the chief elections officer at GECOM. He, according to reports, went to the commission and asked the commission um, ostensibly to stay the election while the charges made by the opposition are being worked out. The commission then deliberated, and the chairman of the commission determined that the minister was not acting constitutionally. This led to a postponement of nomination day and of nominations, and invariably a postponement of the elections, which was set for sometime in February. So there we have it. Since then, GECOM has been trying to work out new arrangements in face of the court challenge by the opposition. They met yesterday, the meeting was adjourned. They met again today. I understand that the meeting was also adjourned to next week, Tuesday, which is the statutory meeting day. And so we don't know where things are. In the meantime, Vincent Alexander's taken to the newspapers. He had a letter in two of the dailies. I didn't get a chance to look at the Guyana Times and the Guyana Chronicle to see whether they carried his letter. But his letter was carried in the Stabroek News and the Kaito News. And basically, Vincent is arguing that they're playing politics with this issue at GECOM. Well, GECOM is a political body for all intents and purposes, but the fact that they're playing politics with this issue doesn't augur well for constitutional and electoral reform. Vincent is going to be here tonight to talk us through what has transpired these last couple of weeks at GECOM and what is expected in the coming days and weeks. Welcome to Politics 101. David Hines here, of course, on a Wednesday night, coming to you from Guyana. It's the Christmas season here, as it is in all countries around the world. Guyana, of course, is very big on Christmas. I have said here that it's more than just a religious holiday. It's cultural, and of course, in recent times, it has become very commercial. Lots of buying and all of that stuff and so forth. But it's Christmas time, and when it's Christmas time in Guyana, it's also rain. So the rain has been falling on and off and on. Of course, when you add our traditional rainy season to the global warming, then you have the kind of crazy weather that you have. But home is home. Guyana is Guyana, and we've gone through a lot more than rain. And as we come on here tonight, we come with the news that the mayor of Georgetown, Mr. Yuvraj Singh, has been arrested by the police, ostensibly for Ubraj Singh, Ubraj Narain, was arrested by the police ostensibly for racial incitement. We have to go back a little to give some context. The mayor took offense to the Ministry of Works attempting to remove vendors from in front of the hospital, the public hospital in Georgetown. And he laid on the road to prevent the demolition vehicles from leaving. Eventually, the demolition of the stands of the vendors was called off. The mayor then questioned why the racial or the difference in treatment of citizens. Why is it different for different races? And he questioned whether, in fact, Guyana was becoming a Muslim state and some other things he's reported to have said. But he was basically questioning what all sane Guyanese, all right-minded Guyanese, all fair Guyanese should be asking. Why the difference in treatment for people of different ethnic groups? The mayor was drawing attention to the fact that all over Guyana, people trying to make a living have been putting up things along the roadways. And these people have not been challenged, or some people have not been challenged. But here are people, mostly of one ethnic group, African Guyanese, in front of the hospital. They're plying their trade, trying to survive in a land in which it's very difficult to survive. And the government, the central government, acting outside of its jurisdiction, attempting to forcibly move them. The mayor has drawn attention to the fact that the streets of Georgetown, or most of them, are under the jurisdiction of the mayor and the town council of Georgetown, not the central government. The central government, through its spokesperson, the venerable minister, venerable in quotes, Minister One Edgil, agrees that the central government does not have jurisdiction over Newmarket streets and other streets in Georgetown. But he argues the central government has responsibility for law and order. I was reminded today that we had some law and orders in villages. I know in Buxton we had a law and order, and I understand there was one in parts of Georgetown. But so Minister Jill is becoming a law and order. So it is the central government versus the local government. And the central government is coming with law and order force. We have, according to the government, the responsibility for law and order. Well, people selling in front of the hospital, providing obviously a needed service, trying to make a living. They're not there committing crimes. They're not there skylarking. They're not there liming. They're there trying to make a living, the right to life. And the government feels that it has to use its authority, that is to use the force at its disposal to remove them. That's the one Guyana that you're talking about. The one Guyana that does not include those vendors. They're not part of Ali's one Guyana because he's trying to deny them a living. And the mayor stood up for what is right, stood up for justice. He threw himself on the ground and prevented them from removing poor people from making a living. In this oil-rich Guyana, we have the spectacle of the government trying to remove the stands of poor people who are trying to make a living. The mayor stood up for justice, stood up for those vendors. And he's asking, is this Guyana a racially equitable place? Are all ethnic groups being treated with the same kind of dignity? The mayor is asking, I have asked, we have asked, ordinary Guyanese have asked, foreign observers have asked. And the government didn't get to use the force against the vendors on that night. It has now opted to use the force against Mr. Narayan. The police arrested Mr. Narayan at his office this afternoon and charged him for racial incitement. So you now cannot mention the word race in Guyana. It's called, according to the government, racial incitement. Where are we in this country? Where are we in this country? Where are we headed? Can somebody please tell me what Mayor Narayan, what is this incitement? Who is he inciting? And what is he inciting them to do? Can somebody please tell me? Who is Mayor Narayan inciting? Many questions whether all ethnic groups in this country are treated fairly. And what is he inciting them to do? You see, let's be frank here, and Vincent is ready, and I'm going to get him in a minute. Those of us of African Guyanese heritage who have questioned the way in which African Guyanese have been mistreated by the government. They've called us all kinds of names. They've threatened to lock us up and all kinds of things. And very few of our Indian Guyanese public figures have given solidarity to us. One can think of G.H.K. Lal and one or two Indian Guyanese in the People's National Congress. But other than that, no other Indian public figures, Indian Guyanese, have come out. And I think what is the story here is that Mayor Narain is Indian Guyanese, and that he has spoken out on a very touchy issue as far as the government is concerned. And they've moved against him. Well, we have to give solidarity to the mayor. We have to give solidarity to the mayor because he's standing up for justice. But in another way, he's standing up for African Guyanese dignity. When the vast majority of Indian public voices have either been silent or have been in open collusion with those who are presiding over what we see and what we are presenting data now to prove as racial discrimination against minorities, against some ethnic group. They say we are all now minorities, but against some ethnic group, especially against African Guyanese. Good evening to all of you who are joining us tonight on a Wednesday night. Good evening to you. And good evening to all of you who have continued in these last 3 years to come on to these programs in the evening. Come on here, come on to show your solidarity. Hands across the water, from North America to Europe, to the Caribbean, to Guyana, to Africa. We are holding our hands across the water, and we are witnessing for our own freedom and our own justice. We were born free. Some of us were enslaved and indentured. We beat those systems and we took the shackles off of our feet. And every time we hear the crack of the whip, and that crack of the whip comes in many forms. It comes in the discrimination. It comes in the 8%. It comes in the arrest of the mayor. Every time I hear the crack of the whip, my blood runs cold. So said Robert Nesta Marley. Every time I hear the crack of the whip, my blood runs cold. And we are living under a government that is prepared to crack the whip at every twist and turn. Every time a minister messes with the boundaries or constituencies at election, I hear the crack of the whip. Every time the DPP becomes a magistrate and operates as though a prima facie case has been made out or has not been made out against some people in high places. Every time she takes a case out of court, preventing it from proceeding, I hear the crack of a whip. Every time an African woman is spat upon by those in high places, I hear the crack of a whip. Every time the governing party refuses to cleanse the voters' list. I hear the crack of a whip and my body runs cold. It is not Ubraj Narain who should be charged for all kinds of incitement, racial incitement. It is those in power who should be charged for all kinds of incitement, because they're inciting this country to move to the edge. We have been trying on these programs to keep us in place against all the transgressions and the threats. Guyana, to use the words of the late George Lamin, is a dangerous place. And we are living in dangerous times. We are living under a government that is prepared to crack the proverbial whip at every twist and turn. We are living under a dictatorship. To all, and welcome to Politics 101. There is never a quiet day when we can come here and talk about love, brotherly love and sisterly love, love of country, love of family. Can't there be a day when we sit down as human beings and speak about those deeper things? No, every day, relentlessly, we come on here and we have to talk about the transgressions of this government. Are we there, Panam? Are we there, Panam? If we were thinking that we could settle down and have a quiet Christmas, we have to think again. They're saying that old village song I was quoting there from, Turn Back Yat Man. Are we there, Panam? Are we there, Panam? Welcome to Politics 101. Tonight is Vincent Alexander, and I think Vincent is ready, and we are going to bring in him now to talk about what's happening at GECOM. But Vincent, good evening.
Good evening.
We're not seeing you on video. We're not seeing on video. We're hearing you. I think there is some problems there with Mr. Alexander. I think he's going to sort that out, and then we'll have him in. He's saying his device is not connected. I think he has to sort that out there. You have to sort it out. Good evening to all of you, Mr. White Vibert from the East Bank of Demerara. Good evening to you. Good evening to you, Franklin. Verlin, good evening. And good evening to all of you. Good evening to you, Mr. David. And I want to thank a couple of people who have made their contributions there to Politics 101 in the last 24 hours. I want to thank Yuri. I want to thank Brentnell. I want to thank Neville for making the contribution to our fundraising drive at our end of year fundraising drive, which we kicked off last week. And Some of you have made your contribution. We want to say thanks. Those of you who have not yet made your contribution, please do so. Let's see if we have no Mr. Alexander. Here he is. Here he is. Here he is. Here he is. You know, you get in this business when you hear sound and you see you say, yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Let's talk. The last time you were here, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about what was beginning to transpire there. I think it was just at the time that the opposition had moved to the courts, challenging the minister's authority to demarcate boundaries in the constituencies for the election, the local government election.
No, that is
And
not
also,
what they.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is not what they had gone to the court for. They had
All
gone
right,
to
go
the
ahead.
court challenging the preparation of the list.
The preparation of the list. Yes, that's the and fill us in on that preparation of the list. What are they really challenging?
We are into a local government election cycle. Local government, unlike national elections, after the judgment of the Chief Justice, still requires the electorate, the voter, to be resident in the local area. It means the voter must be resident in the constituency of the local government area to be able to vote in that constituency. It therefore means that when you are preparing the list, you have to provide for the electorate be able to object to someone whose name appears on a list for a constituency in which the person does not live. What GECOM did was to proceed to prepare the list as if they were preparing for a national election and did not apply the rule in relation to residency. And therefore, what would have happened is that thousands of persons who have moved from one area to the other, given the opportunity to have houses in new places, would remain on a list and be able to vote in a place where they're not resident. And similarly, somebody who is not resident would be able to be nominated to become a councillor in a place where he or she is not resident. These elections are about representation. And the question is, how could you allow someone who is not resident in a particular area to become the representative of the people of that particular area? And the law clearly does not provide for such persons to become representatives. But if you don't do claims and objections based on the constituency and the local government area, and in that process make it clear that you can object if the person is not resident, then in fact you're flying in the face of the law and in the face of the intent for the voters to vote for their representatives because they live in that area, and for the representatives to represent those voters because the representative too comes from that particular area. That is what was not been done. And for over 2 months, Commissioner Corbyn sought to identify that problem. He was ignored. The commissioners nominated by the government went public to say he was delaying the process. That led to the AFC, APNU AFC, going to the court to get a ruling on this matter. The weekend after they had moved to the court, the CEO said that, in his words, he likes to be responsive because democracy is about being responsive. And since the APNU AFC is a major stakeholder and have raised questions, that in response, he's proposing that we now conduct claims and objections that would facilitate the removal of persons who are not entitled to be on those lists because they are not resident. No, he didn't say he did something wrong. He just said, look, I'm a Democrat. And so since these guys are major stakeholders, I will show them how democracy works. So I'm now going to be responsive. And so he came to the commission with a proposition that we engage in claims and objections to rectify the problem. And that led to a situation where we engaged in discussions and eventually a proposition by him as to how we can go about rectifying the situation. In that process, because of the time that passed, we had to cancel the date for nominations, and that date today is still not yet fixed, to allow for the rectification of the problem. Parallel to that problem, we saw the Minister of Local Government issuing orders configuring and reconfiguring constituencies in local government areas. Under the laws of Guyana, and more particularly under the Local Government Elections Amendment Act, it is specified in Section 38A(5) that it is the Elections Commission which can fix constituencies and not the minister. That notwithstanding, 3 commissioners prepared a submission to prove that the minister had that authority. The preparation of that submission led to an oral intervention which they asked to be documented and circulated, showing otherwise. That was done, and it was then left to the chairperson to make a determination. The chairperson determined that indeed the minister did not have the authority, but went on to say that there was no real problem because she had no knowledge that the minister had exercised authority which he did not have, in a very convoluted press release. And I want to read that press release, so because the whole nation was confused by that press release. And the paragraph I want to read reads as follows. Addressing some existing concerns regarding the recently gazetted orders of the minister, in which he made changes to the existing local government areas. Make note of that. He made changes to the existing local government areas, and at the same time may have identified, make a note of that, not made changes, may have identified changes to those constituencies within the local government areas. The chairman pointed out that those changes, and remember, she said he made changes and he may have made changes, and now she's saying that those changes made to the boundaries of the local authority areas and any changes to electoral divisions within those local authorities areas are within the legal authority of the minister. So she suggested he may have made changes to constituencies. And the way the paragraph is constructed, many readers came to the conclusion she was saying that if those changes which he may have made were made, that he had the authority to do so. However, in the latter paragraph, she emphasized that if the minister sought to form or change the configuration of constituencies within those areas, he would have usurped the power granted to the commission to combine and subdivide electoral divisions to form constituencies. If such were the case, the minister would have acted outside of his legal remit. Now, she is saying this on the 9th of December. But we have, on the 20th of October, a gazetted order entitled Order Number 40 of 2022, the Local Authorities Elections Constituencies Order 2022. And we also have the 15th of November, and remember she's making this comment on the 9th of December. The 15th of November, Order Number 50 of 2022, the Local Authorities Elections Constituencies Amendments Order of 2022. And in that order, the minister sought to establish constituencies, an example of which is the Bryceland Potosi constituency, which previously did not exist. Yet, although this has occurred on the 20th of October and the 15th of November, on the 9th of December, she is saying he may have identified changes. Well, in fact, he would have already made changes. And to make it worse, GECOM, by that time, had already posted up electoral lists in that effort that the CEO referred to correct the problem. Those lists included the constituencies that had been created by the minister. And here was my dear chairperson saying to us, may have made. And at a subsequent meeting says, I have no knowledge that he has. And at yesterday's meeting said, I don't know that he has done so. Therefore, we can approve the plan for the elections and look at that matter at a subsequent time. But with my documentation, I would not allow that to persist. And so eventually, it was brought clearly to the fore that the minister had contravened the provisions. And so even in that circumstance, she said, let's adjourn and let's see exactly what the minister has done. I had already seen, and she should have already seen, because she had referred to that gazette, those gazetted orders in her press conference, but then claimed no knowledge of the content. Let's see what the minister would have done. And reiterated that he had no authority to demarcate constituencies. Today, a report was brought where it was unequivocally clear that the minister had in fact demarcated constituencies. And so GECOM has unequivocally now stated that the minister had no authority to demarcate those constituencies. As a consequence of that, we cannot go ahead as yet with preparing the voters list, because the voters list can only be prepared based on legally constituted constituencies. And so we have now, after certain commissioners asked for permission to have time to read what she said today, concluded that next Tuesday, we will determine how we, GECOM, will constitute those constituencies, after which, and only after which, we can proceed to deal with the question of the voters list being prepared. So, one, the nomination day has been cancelled. Two, we do not presently have a list constituted in the manner that's required. Three, the determination of how we will do that will have to await the determination of how we GECOM constitute the constituencies, after which we'll get back to the question of the preparation of the list. And that's the status quo.
Vincent Alexander, Commissioner of GECOM, walking us through what has transpired there over the last couple of weeks that has led in all from all that we have seen. It has led, for all intents and purposes, to standoffs there at GECOM. Vincent, today I saw something purportedly coming from the chairman saying that there are two options that you all have there. One option, and I'm paraphrasing here, one option is to endorse what the minister's already done. That is to GECOM to say, we endorse what he has done and proceed. And the other option is for GECOM to do its own constituency arrangement and proceed to operate from that basis. I take it that you've seen that. What do you make of it?
But that was her ruling. That was a part of her ruling. Let me say this, that the use of constituencies was introduced by law in 2009. By law in 2009. Under the law, GECOM in 2010 established a procedure that required the registration officers in the affected areas, along with the assistant chief scrutineers of the parties, consult in the local area, and based on those consultations, to make a recommendation to GECOM for GECOM to determine how the constituencies would be demarcated. That has been the process. In what you saw, she has said that is one of the options. But that is what has occurred starting in 2010, very much occurred in 2016, also occurred in 2018, and what, for all intents and purposes, should occur in 2022 as well.
Putting it starkly there, Vincent Alexander. Welcome to those of you who have just joined us. We are discussing the developments at GECOM around the local government election. As most of you would know, because we have been covering this story on all the new media programs, you would know that the nominations day for the election has been cancelled. And so the election in that earlier arrangement was to have been held in February, for all intents and purposes, in March, sorry.
March
that
13th.
election, March 13th, that election, quite a day. March 13th is the day of the Grenada Revolution in 1979. And that's a date that is etched in the minds of some of us. So there is this standoff now at GECOM, because it seems as though the three PPP nominated commissioners are hell-bent on pushing forward with the previous arrangement. And the opposition commissioners, as you know, would have been calling for them to look at that voters list for the local government election for a long time. Charles Corbyn has been reported here by Vincent before, has been trying to point this out, and he has not been given an hearing. And now we see the chairman seems to be agreeing but not agreeing, you know, and we don't know what is happening there. Now, Vincent, you've laid out the technical aspects and so on. Is there anything else that we need to know to get a picture of the technical failings of GECOM, the GECOM Secretariat in this instance, as far as the local government elections are concerned?
Well, from the need to know aspect, first of all, let me speak to the citizens. Citizens need to know that for local government elections, when we have claims and objections, that they can go and make an objection if they are aware of someone who is on the list who has moved out of the area into a new housing scheme. Citizens need to know that so that they can ensure only the persons who live in their constituencies and who live in the local government areas are on the list and are going to be eligible to cast votes to determine who represents the constituency and who represents the local government area. Secondly, we need to understand that some of the problems have arisen, in my humble opinion, because GECOM has been slothful and probably intentionally so in appointing persons to vacant positions. In recent times, in my view, GECOM has contrived to appoint a CEO. I was of the impression, of the view when he was appointed, that he was not eligible because he did not have the required years of experience as a deputy CEO. They contrived, he was appointed. They subsequently contrived to appoint the ACEO. We had persons nominated to be the ACEO, that's an assistant chief elections officer. The chairman came forward and said that no one was qualified, we must re-advertise. They re-advertised, someone new stepped in, all new stepped in. But from the list of the persons whom she said no one was eligible, 4 persons continued to be eligible and may have been interviewed, but now they were being interviewed along with someone who had not previously applied. And they then appointed that person who is well past the age of retirement on the grounds the person has experience. When there are other people who have experience, qualified and younger, who are bypassed or retiree, well past the age. And so that was another contrived situation. Having contrived those 2, they seem to stall the process. And so, for example, as we go to a local government elections, GECOM does not have a civic and voter education manager. And so there's little information out there informing the public about local government and the elections. And so the preparedness is a problem. And so one may well argue that some of the problems we've had where the wrong things have been done, lists prepared correctly, have to do with the fact that we don't have the personnel to do the job. Those who are there are probably overloaded on one hand, and there are issues about their preparedness, as was raised when they were being employed. So those are some of the matters that are there within GECOM that are impacting the preparation for the elections, not only the preparation of GECOM, but the preparation of the citizens who should be acquainted with information, particularly since they are going to be new voters who may not have voted before, who need to understand what local government is all about so they can approach their civic responsibility from a conscious perspective. GECOM is not creating the environment for GECOM itself to carry out its mandate to produce an election where the citizens are able to express their views about the candidates from an informed perspective.
Vincent Alexander there pointing out that there are many things that are not in place for a proper election. A local government election, of course, is due. And GECOM, from a technical standpoint, we haven't moved to the political yet. The technical standpoint, there are things that must be in place, regardless of what's happening politically, for a proper election. And the commissioner is arguing that these things are not in place. I find it scandalous that there is not someone who is in charge of the information section, the voter education section. We all agree that democratic elections are not just about people going and voting, but about people being properly informed. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who talked about an informed citizenry. And you know, it's the job of the state. It is the job of the state to ensure that people are informed. It's a basic but important aspect of any election. And I find it scandalous that GECOM has not filled that position. Vincent, you sit next to your you want to say something? No?
No, you go ahead.
Yes, you sit there next to your co-commissioners from the PPP. What's their stance in all of this?
Well, as I said earlier, on the question of the minister's authority, they collectively prepared a document arguing that the minister has authority to establish the constituency boundaries. And in the face of a document that indicated otherwise, they have not changed their position. It is only because the chairman has been persuaded otherwise that GECOM is now approaching the matter in the manner in which the matter in which it should be approached. They have retained the position that the minister has the authority, and you know it's amazing that you can have legal officers who deal with the law in that way. Fortunately, the chairperson on this occasion, reluctantly I would say, has been persuaded to acknowledge what the law in fact provides for. On the question of the preparation of the list, same budup, so to speak. They embraced the wrong preparation and have never really changed their position. But because the chairman has been persuaded otherwise, for a change in recent times, we've had a four on the different side of the equation. And so the matters are being addressed, albeit reluctantly.
Albeit reluctantly.
And so one gets the impression that there is some motive that's driving their disposition. And so they are trying to manipulate the law to respond to whatever that motive might be.
So when we hear a change at GECOM, really it's not a change on the part of the PPP nominated commissioners. It's really the chairman of the commission adjusting our position somewhat, and even that adjustment we are not clear about. Welcome to Politics 101. I'm seeing your comments, very informed comments. Somebody asked about the lawsuit that Mr. Alexander should have brought against Mr. Jack Dio. Where is it? I know we are inundated with news and inundated with the crassness of this government that sometimes we miss those things. We miss some things. So far as I know, Mr. Alexander's filed that lawsuit weeks ago. Vincent, am I correct?
Almost a month now.
Yes. Yes.
But it's not.
Yes.
It's not fixed. It's not a fixed dated suit, and so you know how the court system works.
The courts operate.
It's
Yes.
not yet come up.
So next week, Vincent, there was an adjournment yesterday, an adjournment today. So we move now to next week. I wouldn't want you to give away strategy and all of that kind of stuff, but optimistic that GECOM would do the right thing?
Well, we have to work towards GECOM doing the right thing, and we know what the right thing is. We know that the question of the list, that they should extract the list as a voters list or voters register based on constituencies and the local government areas. And on that basis, they should do claims and objections. We know that that can no longer be done before the matter of the constituencies is settled, or else you wouldn't have the correct demarcations for configuring this, so that the constituency matter has first to be resolved. When that is resolved, then we can go back to how we deal with the question of the extraction of the list, claims and objections, and the preparation of those voters' lists. And you know what's interesting? People don't realize what's happening here. Local government elections is not one election. There's 70 elections at the level of the local government, 80 of the local government areas. But more than that, there are over 600 elections, because every constituency is a discrete election to have a councillor elected from the constituency. And so there are really over 600 and something constituency elections, plus 80 elections at the level of the neighborhood democratic councils and the municipality. And it takes a bit of doing to have that done. Now, we know that the government has gone to Parliament and that they have passed the legislation which will institute draconian fines on electoral officers for strict liability offenses. And let me break that down. In law, there are some offenses only require that the act be carried out. And once the act is carried out, whether you did it with intent or not, once the act is carried out, you're guilty. In other instances, you're only guilty if they can show an act was carried out and you intentionally carried out the act. In relation to the reform of RUPA, all of the penalties are related to acts where people do something. Whether or not they did it intentionally is not a matter to be addressed. You just have to do it. So if you make a mistake and that mistake adds up to an act that should not have been done, you're guilty. And there are draconian fines, millions of dollars and years of imprisonment. One of the contentions is that that will dissuade qualified persons from applying for those jobs. Who wants to get a job where if you make a mistake, you can end up paying a heavy fine or being in prison. And so the chances are that GECOM may have a problem attracting the quality and the quantity of staff for the conduct of over the 600 and something elections. That is not fantasy. That is not theory. We had a situation where the People's Progressive Party submitted objections for 72 persons who were proposed to be employed by GECOM to help to conduct the elections, 72 persons. The CEO responded to their objection. What did he say? The first thing he said is, I don't have more people. And where I have more people, they are either less qualified, did worse in the tests, or in the local area, we don't have sufficient people. I have to move people from another area into the local area. And so for me, that's a manifestation already of the reduced response to GECOM in its attempt to recruit staff. And that comes clearly out of the situation created by the amendment of the laws in terms of the offenses and the penalties that are ascribed to those offenses.
Quite a grim picture there. Those amendments to ROPA having that effect that some commentators and opposition politicians have talked about. Vincent, do those amendments have any impact on the local government election that is in question now?
Well, that's a question those amendments, if assented to, or when assented to, take effect from the time.
They're not retroactive.
I don't know. They should not be retroactive. There was no provision, as far as I know, in the law that says they're to be applied retroactively. They should take effect from when assented to. I don't know when they'll be assented to. I don't know if it's before the elections. And so if they're assented to before the elections, then somebody who does something in these elections can well find themselves subjected to those laws.
Subjected. Vincent Alexander here, bringing us up to date on what's transpiring at GECOM. We await that meeting next week. And after that meeting, of course, we'll have Vincent back to give us an update. Vincent, as we go out, what do you think is the general political game plan of the PPP? Because it's obvious that they are behind all machinations. And I read your letter today very carefully. I mean, the letter in I saw it in two dailies. I don't know whether it was in the Guyana Times and the Guyana Chronicle, but I certainly read them on the different headlines in the Chronicle and
in the Stabrook and Kaichur.
I'm sorry, the Stabrook and the Kaichur News. And you seem to be
Chronicles never carried a letter I wrote.
They never carried it.
Chronicles never carried a letter written by me.
Wow,
I have stopped sending my letters to Chronicles.
Yeah.
They don't carry it.
Yeah. You seem to be hinting in that letter today that there's some political machinations at work.
Well,
am I wrong in concluding that?
When you talk about constituencies being configured, it provides for the possibility of boundary gerrymandering. It's a known thing that boundaries can be gerrymandered in a manner to create enclaves that are favorable to a particular party and therefore to influence the outcome of the elections, particularly in situations where you have first past the post. And our constituencies are first past the post. So the way in which you manipulate those boundaries can impact the results of the elections. And therefore, somebody who is in charge of those boundaries can well show favor to one or the other political party. And so one of the points I made, I think, in the letter or in my submission to GECOM is that it is not a best practice for an interested party to be responsible for establishing boundaries. If you go to Trinidad and Tobago, you will see that the Electoral Commission has that responsibility. If you go to Jamaica, you'll see the same, all over the world. The same applies in Guyana under our laws, the local government election constituencies. But yet, from a legal perspective, and more ridiculously, from a moral perspective, commissioners were contending that the minister, who's an interested party in local government, should be the one to establish the boundaries of our constituencies. And I dare say that this minister seems to have a penchant for usurping the authority of others. Because, as I mentioned on the previous occasion, the same minister has on 2 occasions gone public to say that local authorities cannot raise the rates in relation to taxing rates. When, if one checks the amendments in 2013, I think it was, and prior to 2013, of the Municipal and District Councils Act and the Local Authorities Act, one could see that the provisions for the minister to approve the estimates of those authorities have been removed, and that the specific responsibility for rates reside with the authorities. And therefore, the minister cannot tell them they can't change the rates. Certainly, they can't change the valuation because that authority still resides with the valuation department. But the rates are within the purview of the authorities. But we have a minister, the same one who wants to establish constituency boundaries, telling our local authorities that they cannot raise the rates. And in similar manner, another minister usurping the authority of the municipality in relation to who controls municipal streets and the adjoining parapets to those streets. In point in case, the situation in Newmarket Street. It's not a declared public road, and so the minister does not have authority. The authority resides in the city council. Whatever you feel about the encumbrance, as it is referred to, if you are running a country based on the rule of law, then there has to be a different approach to the resolution of that matter other than the breach of the law.
Breach of the law. And I don't think anywhere in our constitution has a supremacy clause, as the minister seemed to be hinting. But he's arguing for order over law and order, as he says it, over survival, because people out there are
No,
surviving.
but what he's arguing for is disorder to correct what he sees as disorder.
There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Putting it starkly there, Vincent Alexander.
I suppose it's a mathematical equation he's getting involved in. You know, in maths, 2 minuses could make a plus.
Exactly. Exactly. Vincent, thank you very much for coming on tonight and to give us some updates and insights and analysis into what's happening at GECOM. It's the pulse of where our country is coming out of the 2020, whatever you described those months as GECOM is pivotal going forward. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much. Responsibility is mine.
And tomorrow night, we are going to be covering the issue of the removal of those vendors, or the attempt to remove vendors from in front of the hospital, and the mayor's action, and the government bad-minded response to the mayor to arrest him today. We're going to try very hard to see if we get the mayor to come on tomorrow evening. But even if he's not able to come on to Politics 101, we will have a panel to discuss that development. I end with the same question. Who are they claiming that the mayor is inciting? And what is he inciting them to do? Where is the racial incitement if the mayor is asking? He's asking, are we being fair in Guyana? He's asking why different treatment for different groups in the society. And he was charged. Guyanese. I know it's Christmas, but we can't let this go. We can't, it's taking it too far. What next? What next? Using the word race will get you arrested? What next? Please, we got to keep watch. But we have to do more than keep watch. We have to agitate. And this program and other programs are the forefront of doing that. Please, our end of the year fundraising drive is on. Please, if you will, make a contribution to our program to ensure that we continue to do the work that we are doing. The particulars are on the screen. Please make your contribution to our end of the year fundraising drive as we seek to expand Politics 101 as we move in to the new year. Tomorrow night, we are going to deal with Ubraj Narayan's arrest, the mayor. And I put it starkly. I think they went after him because he's Indian Guyanese. And we can't allow that brother to be hounded by these hounds. We've got to stand by him because he's standing by us. Tomorrow night, we'll talk more about that. Please make your contribution to keep our program alive. And as we sign out tonight, every time, Brother Bob says, every time I hear the crack of the whip, my blood runs cold. These people figure that they are the new time masters. Eric Williams said, Master, they're done. Master, they're done. 1956, at the University of Woodford Square, as it was dubbed, Dr. Eric Williams said, Master, they're done. The Calypsonian Chuck does say, Master, they must done. There's no whip. And we have got to take the whip out of their hands. Good night. And tomorrow night, we come back. We come back. I love Brother Jimmy Cliff. And above all, I love his song, The Harder They Come, the harder they fall. The harder they come, the harder they fall. We've got to stand firm. We cannot turn our backs now. We can't turn back now. We've come far. And they're prepared to use whatever power at their disposal. And what we have at our disposal is people's power.